seems like a lot of prominent, daughters of high-ranking people marry Jewish men. What was it, Nixon's daughter and Clinton's daughter, Trump's daughter? Nixon's daughter was, Jack Kennedy's daughter married a guy named Schlossberg. Yeah. And
Didn't Arnold marry
He married Shriver.
She's Jewish?
Shriver. Maria Shriver was Jewish?
She was?
But somebody told me so.
Really? That one's hard to believe. Pretty. Okay, so
No, she's gone.
Maria?
potato, potato. Okay. All right. Hamotse Aveda. If a person finds a lost object, sheyesh ba simin, that has a simin, chayiv la'achriz aleha. Then he has to make a public announcement. Kagon litlos moda bebate knesiyos. So these are different ways that you can do this. You can hang up a sign in the shul and the base medrash, uve'ezor mitziata aveda, and in the general area of where the item was lost, the item was found, I should say, uvemakom mitzias ha'aveda, and the actual place. So in the neighborhood and in the actual place also. O lefarsem bi'iton b'mador ha'avedot she'eno karuch b'tashlum. Or if the newspaper has a special place where you don't have to pay for the ad, so then you're obligated to do that as well. In other words, you're not obligated to incur financial loss in order to return the Aveda, but anything that doesn't cost you money, you're obligated to do. Kigon, nimtza beged o tachshir o arnak v'chuli b'makom ploni. So you would say, found a garment or a piece of jewelry or a wallet in such and such a place. וכשיבוא המעבד וייתן סימנים לעבדתו, יחזיר לו למעבד עבדתו. And when the person who is the owner provides the simanim, so then you have to give him back his lost object. So that's pretty straightforward.
What does he pay you the costs that you incur?
So he has to give.
Is it before we give it back to him?
Yeah, thank you.
Is it before you give it back to him? Like you say, excuse me, buddy, here's your thing, I found it, I did the right thing. Cost me $500 to take care of your goat or whatever had to be done.
Thank you.
And he refuses to pay, or he doesn't have the money.
So are you able to hold the item ransom is really what you're asking?
Well, you put out some call that you incurred costs by maintaining it for him.
Well, we know the halacha says
You have to be reimbursed.
that you're entitled to reimbursement.
You hold it back and not give it back.
Right.
You reimburse it.
It's a good question. I don't know. Maybe we'll see that. Maybe we get some clarity on that. Okay. Thank you so much. Aroa avedato she'in ba simin. Thank you, Joby. If a person sees a lost object that has no simin, right? So one of the things we saw before is what if you see an item that is in a makom hamishtamer, that is in a protected place, right? So it's like it's in a stender, inside a stender in the shul. So there we said, don't touch it. It's not lost.
Yeah, it was placed there.
It was placed there, so don't touch it. Here's another example of where there's a question whether you should touch the item or not. Let's say you see a lost item that has no siman. Yesh omrim she'enu chayev lahagbia. Some say that you can just keep on walking. You have no obligation to return a lost item that cannot be identified. V'chein hachra'as mikama poskei zmanenu, and that's how many of our poskim hold. V'yesh omrim kol shalom yisyashu haba'olim tzarich litlo al das lahachzer kishizbar al pi'edim shuhu ba'olav. But you know something, there's another way that something can be identified, even if there's no inherent siman. What if there are witnesses who saw this guy walking by here and something fell out of his pocket? And they didn't do anything about it, but at least they can testify that it's his. And therefore, based on that, maybe you do have to pick it up in the hopes that witnesses will come along and be able to identify the owner. So haskamas ha'achronim sharo avedas v'lo natla afal pi shenevda achar kach eino chayiv b'tashlumin. So you have this machloikes, but the bottom line, the poskim come to the conclusion that if you see someone's lost item and you fail to pick it up when you should have, you have no legal liability. So you have no legal liability.
You might get a mitzvah though.
Yeah, and then the question is
It's a mitzvah foregone.
No legal, what about morals?
what about a moral obligation? So as long as it didn't come into your hands, it seems like there's no obligation whatsoever. I'm looking at the footnotes to see if he says anything about chayiv bidei shamayim. He doesn't say anything. Okay.
But if it has no siman and there's no witnesses, don't you have to go up and-
You could, but let's say it's not some, it's haloshes, you know.
Well, something you want.
Yeah. What?
You cannot put it back.
One, right.
It's a one. There's no ID. And you have to keep it, or you have to put it down and just keep it.
Well, how do you verify that there's no siman?
That's why.
Yeah, once you, it seems like once you pick it up, you'd have to hold on to it. Unless, like we said before, in a case of a makom hamishtamir, that if you do pick it up, just put it back where you found it. You don't have to take it. It could be that that's the halacha.
Does it matter in that case how much time has gone by? Because you had it for a day and then you put it back where you found it.
No. If once you walk away, you have to hold on to it.
Aha, okay, so the putting it back is immediate.
Putting it back would be if you haven't left the place. That's what we had seen previously, is as long as you haven't left the place, you're allowed to put it back.
Right.
Okay. Mishi higbias aveda al das lahashiva leba'alim, v'himtin milahachriz al haveda ad shehisyashu haba'alim. Let's say a person picked up an item, say, you know what, I have to return this. And then, for some reason, he got distracted, which is what happens to a lot of us. And we have every intention of doing the right thing, but we just never got around to posting signs. Okay? And you say to yourself, honey, you say to your wife, honey, where did I put that lost wallet? What lost wallet?
Now you've lost the lost object.
Yeah. So, but basically you neglect to announce it. You neglect to post signs, and sufficient time goes by so that you can assume that the owner has had yeyush. So then if at that point you decide you're going to keep it for yourself, over mehator al mitzvah hashev tashiv, then you're in violation of at least a positive commandment. You may not be in violation of the Isser of lo tigzol. You may not be in violation of lo suchali hisalim. You may not hide your eyes, but you are in violation of the mitzvahs aseh of hashev tashiv, because you didn't follow through. Vim lo higbiya ad shenisyashu haba'olam alachar sheisyashu lokha la'atzmo. Now, let's say you only picked it up after the owner had yeyush. And so therefore, even though the owner had yeyush, you still may have an obligation to return it if it has a siman on it. But you instead decide to keep it for yourself. Over alav shel lo suchali hisale, then you may not be in violation of lo sigzol because the owner had yeyush, and therefore he gave up hope of retrieving it. but you're still in violation of the negative commandment of you're not permitted to hide yourself from doing the right thing. V'yesh omrim she'nigbias ha'aveda kedei lahachzir leba'aleha v'nisbar she'ein ba siman, that some say that if you lifted up a lost item with the intention of returning it, but then you discover that it really has no siman, like the wallet that has no ID, then even lechatchila you'd be allowed to keep it if sufficient time goes by that the owner has had yesh. So there's a bunch of different opinions here. So that's one of the reasons why when it comes to the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, there's sometimes a lack of clarity in some of these halachos. So it's always best to ask a shaila when you find a lost item. Certainly when it has a siman, it's pretty straightforward. You find an item, it has a siman, do the right thing and try to post an announcement. A lot of times what people do is that they'll find an item and then they'll bring it up to me or bring it up to somebody else in the shul, to one of the gaboim, and say, here, I found this. You take care of it. Well, why should I take care of it? What does it have to do with me? Well, you're the rabbi. So it's your problem now. Okay.
What do you say?
Not much I can do. Once they put it on my shtender and say, here, Rabbi, I found this. What am I supposed to say? That's true.
What do you share?
That's right. Just tell them, you should really put up a sign where you found it and let people know that you found it there. And in the meantime, I'll put it in the lost and found. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, Hamotzei Aveda Shenischayv Bahashavasa Chayv Lishmor Aleha Ulahanicha B'Makom Shamur. So when you find a lost object and you have to return it, so in the interim, you have to keep it in a place that is well protected, where it's not going to incur damage. And you have to do whatever you need to do to prevent the item from becoming damaged. If you have to air it out every once in a while, that's what you have to do. And anything like that until the owner comes back. And certainly that's true with if you find a living creature that belongs to somebody. You have to take care of it. Now, yeah.
But just on that point, let's say it's, somebody down the street that has a cat that disappeared and the cat shows up. You don't like cats and you're allergic to cats or whatever. And they're weighed in for the day or something like that. Are you responsible still to take that?
It's a very good question. Are you obligated to take care of an animal that is going to really be the cause of a lot of problems in your house? It's a very good question.
So close to your health if you're allergic to it.
I'm not even talking about sakana. That's a different story. Because then
Yeah, certainly you'd have an argument for if it's a sakana. But let's say you really don't like cats, or let's say this cat is a nuisance, or let's say just that cat. Yeah.
Knock on the door, tell them you spotted a cat in such a place. That's a movable thing. It's not something you can isolate.
I think, I'm sensitive to that. I think that there are a number of people who just wouldn't even want to pick up a cat and want to touch it.
And they may not want to be picked up.
That's right. Cats are very particular. Yeah.
The for love that have to touch the cat.
But isn't that also like
What's
don't
that?
want to pick? Isn't it also like a person that doesn't have to pick something up because it's below their dignity?
Yeah. But this is not below your dignity. It's just that it's not something that you don't enjoy. You
consider the cat disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll get my dog after the cat.
Now, look, it's a valid question. It's a valid question. I think we'd have to figure out that there are certain conditions that if it creates a negative reaction in the finder, that he may be exempt from doing it. Okay, let's see if we see anything that has to do with that. Okay, Misha Matza Kli She'ein Bo Simin, Shetzuras Kol HaKelim Misug Zeh Shavim. Let's say you find a widget, okay? It doesn't have a siman because all widgets of that kind are all the same. What would be an example of that? What? An umbrella, maybe. It's a pretty vanilla umbrella. Although there are different, you could argue it's like just a regular black umbrella or a black hat, you
Or
know.
tell us about all the purple velvet with no name on it, they always.
Yeah. Imakli chadash hu harehu shalo. If it's brand new and it doesn't have a siman, you're allowed to keep it. Ve'im eno chadash hu ba'olav shel hakli kishiro so yakiruhu b'tvias ayin chayv lahachriz. But if it's not new, and the person who owns it would be able to eyeball it and say, yeah, I know that's mine. Like, I remember that stain over there, or, or however the way the zipper works. So then you'd have to announce it. She'im yavu talmid chacham shenizar b'diburo u'v'maman shel acherim. Because we have a rule that if a Torah scholar who is very careful about people's finances and very careful in the way that he speaks to always be truthful, Im Omar shahakli shalosh makir al pitvias ayin bevadaus machzirin lo. If such a person would come to you and say, I know that's mine, even though it doesn't have a siman, I recognize it, so then you would certainly return it to him. Avalo lisha'ar anashim. But that's not enough of a reason to return it to other people who may not be as expert. V'chol she'in bo siman begufo shel hakli zacha bo hamotze. And that's the reason why the Shulchan Aruch writes that if something doesn't have a siman inherently, the person's allowed to keep it. Now, that seems to contradict what we had said before, that when you find an item that doesn't have a siman, there is an opinion that says you're allowed to keep it, but there's also an opinion that says that maybe witnesses will be able to identify that it fell from this guy. Uladas moran ha-Shulchan Aruch hamotze tzarech lahachris af makom shein talmidei chachamim yoshvim ba'os makom. The Shulchan Aruch opines that even if you know that there are no Torah scholars in this particular town, you still have to make an announcement because maybe someone was visiting. Avoladas harama tzarech lahachriz zehu dafka ininshu b'makom shel talmidei chachamim mitzuim sham. You go into beis medrash or b'yeshiva or b'batei beis hakneses. According to the Ramah, you'd only have to announce that you found it if it was lost. This item without a siman was lost in a place where there are Talmidei Chachamim prevalent, like in a shul or a beis medrash or in a yeshiva. But if you find it in a place where the vast majority of people are not Talmidei Chachamim, then you're exempt from having to even announce that you found it, and you're allowed to keep it for yourself. So again, another gray area. Next, Hamotze Aveda Shel Chavero, Ubo Bizman Poga Gamba Avedaso. If, let's say, you have an opportunity to retrieve either your lost object or your friend's lost object. Im Yachol Lahavi Lahashiv Eshtehem Chayv L'Tapel Behenu Lahachziram. If you can retrieve both, then you're obligated to do so, and you have to return your friend's item and take care of it in the same way that you would take care of your own. However, V'im Yitapel B'Shel Chaver Yafsid Shalo, but if by taking care of your friend's property, you're going to end up losing your property, so then the general rule is Avedaso Kodemes, that your financial assets come before your friends. Va'afilu l'shel aviv v'rabo, and that's true even if the other person is your father or your rebbe, meaning that even though there's a mitzvah of kibbud av va'em, but you're not obligated to incur financial loss in order to save or retrieve someone else's property. Ela shemikol makom yesh la'adam lasos lifnim mishuras hadin. But a person should strive to go above the letter of the law and not say, well, my needs take priority over the other guy's needs. Ki im keshabar lo bevada yilo hefsed mizeh keshiyasok ba'aveda shelo shayach eslo. Unless it's clear and obvious to you that by having to deal with your friend's lost item, you're going to incur a financial loss because your property will be lost in the process. Vafilu imzeh sha'ar hefsed mamon sheyagilo. Like, and that's true for any financial loss that you're going to incur by having to deal with your friend's lost item. Kagon ezenezik begufo. Let's say you may incur bodily injury. If you're fearful that you're going to incur bodily injury by retrieving this object, you're not under no obligation. O ezech shadalav shal yideze yafsid mama. Or let's say by dealing with your friend's lost item, you might lose parnasa because people will see you walking around with this strange object, and it'll cause you it'll taint your reputation in some way. Let's say, I don't know. Let's
An example of that.
let me just see. I could imagine if a person's, let's say, a rabbi, and like there is a principle of shalol lefi chavodo, that it's if something is beneath your dignity to be seen walking around with such an item. That might be what he's referring to. Like you're a rabbi and you see, I don't know,
Chicken or something.
you're running around after his chicken, or you're walking around with a bunch of balloons. I don't know. I'm not sure, but or
If you're measuring, big rabbi, they're holding an Apple phone.
there you go, an iPhone, yeah. There you go.
So we say you're not obligated to return the money.
Yeah, it may be usher to return the ad. Yeah. Well, let's say you find a TV, be walking around with a TV. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Well, there's no obligation to return. Yeah. Okay. Now let's say matzah ba'alei chayim v'lo bo'o habolim. So we're getting closer to your question, Ron. You find an animal. Okay. Hamotzei aveda v'hichris v'lo bo'o habolim lekachta amr chachamenu zal. So let's say you do make a public announcement. The owner never shows up to claim the item. So our sages say, if the item that was lost is an animal, you have to tend to the animal, make sure it doesn't die, make sure that it stays healthy. So how long do you have to care for the animal? If it's not difficult to care for the animal, v'yesh bahem revach, and the animal is productive, kagon para v'chamor, like a cow or a donkey, shiachol lasos bahem malacha, that you can benefit from their presence, like you can have a cow give milk, or you can have a donkey pull a plow. So, mitapel bahem yud beis chodesh miyom hamatzia, then you have to hold on to it for 12 months. But you are still allowed to work the animal if that's what it's meant for. Oh, maskirin la'acherin. Or you can lease the animal out to others and get the payment for that.
But how are you allowed?
But this is an animal.
This is an animal.
This is an animal specifically. Tarnagoles, or if you find a chicken, mocher biadehen, umachilan midemehen. Ve'es yoseres hamos machzir lebal ha'aveda. I think there must be a typo here, but I think it's beit sehem. I think that's what the word is supposed to be. If you find a chicken, you're allowed to sell the eggs. and feed the chicken from the proceeds of the egg sales. And then the rest of the money you have to return to the owner. In other words, you're not allowed to benefit. You're not allowed to make a profit. You're allowed to make enough money to cover your costs, but you have to give the profit to the owner.
What about your time involved with that, taking away from the rest?
I would calculate
Right,
that.
right.
That's part of it.
No, you're not entitled to the time lost. But now the question is, what if it's consuming a tremendous amount of your time?
And you're losing from your work.
Yeah, right. Ulam yesh balei chayim shetipulam kasha yoser. There are some types of animals that it's much more difficult to care for them. Kagon agalim usiachim, let's say baby calves and foals, like baby donkeys. Metapel bahem shlosha chadashim. So then you only have an obligation to deal with them for 3 months or 90 days. Avalim tzrichim pitum v'ivus. But if the animal requires even more care, it needs to be fatted properly, it needs to be brought over to the trough, and v'chein avazim v'tarnagolim zecharim, or let's say male geese or chickens, like a rooster, metapel bem shloshim yom. That requires even more care. Don't ask me why. I'm not a farmer. So then you're only obligated to deal with them for 30 days. V'imhem ketanim biyoser v'atipol bem hurav. And if it requires even more care because they're really tiny, then you only have an obligation to deal with them for 3 days. And whatever time the rabbis say you have to care for these kinds of animals, you can sell them after that period of time, whether it's 3 days or a year. It depends how time intensive, how labor intensive the care of these animals is. And I guess maybe if we were farmers, we would understand the difference and the amount of time that it takes to deal with each kind of animal. However, according to the Shulchan Aruch, you have to ask the Beis Din how much time you have to spend with it, because there's so much of this is subjective. According to the Shulchan, no, that's not what he's saying. He's saying, according to the Shulchan Aruch, the sale has to be done under the sanction of the Beis Din, because maybe you'll undersell it because you just want to get rid of the animal. So the Shulchan Aruch says that the sale of the object has to be supervised by Beis Din, and you have to sell it for what they say that they feel it's worth. You keep the money with you until the owner comes. V'yitnu simin v'yikablu es hadamim. And then the owner can give a simin at that point, and you give him the cash. V'ilu l'das harama b'haga hashulchan aruch eino tzarich shumas beis din, or rishai laharich al pi atzmo v'liknosa l'tzarka. And according to the Ramah, you're not obligated to do this with the sanction of a beis din. You can just sell it for whatever you feel it's worth. And you can even purchase those animals if you want, as long as you keep the cash for the owner. Now, kol haroa avedas Yisrael v'hitale mimena v'himshich b'darko bitel mitzvahs aseh. Once again, these halachos that he's presenting really are not that well organized, I have to say, but we'll continue. If you see a lost item that you feel belongs to a Jew, a good chance it belongs to a Jew, and you decide just to keep on walking, you have nullified a positive commandment, shel hashev teshite, v'over below saseh shenemar lo sira shorachicha v'salam tamehem. You've violated both a positive and negative commandment. V'im lo halach elo amad al yad ha'aveda ad shenis yashu ha'ba'olim v'na'adlah, but if you just stand there and just wait until you feel that the owner has had yeyush, so then you're not being oiver on the lav, you're not oiver on the mitzvahs aseh, but you're oiver on the mitzvahs los aseh of lo tuchali hitalem. You do not have a right to hide yourself from your obligation. It all depends on the nature of the lost object, I would guess. When you feel that the owner would have yeush once they discover
You're allowed to make that decision yourself. You don't have to go to the base to decide when someone's giving up the issue.
No, apparently not. Apparently not. It's a subjective thing. You have to be able to ascertain that they know that it's lost. And that it was lost in a place where they give up hope of retrieving it. And again, it's very subjective, and that's one of the reasons why these halachas are very gray. So if you take a lost item and you keep it for yourself, then not only have you violated a positive commandment, but you've also violated two negative commandments. Number one, you may not hide, lo tuchalit talem, and ba'al lo tigzol, and do not steal. Shekol haroa shenafel mechaver mikol adam mos o eza chayfetz v'ablom lo yadu me'anafila v'not la mos al manas legozla v'adayin lo hisyashu habalim imena. He says, if you pick up something that you know fell from a fellow Jew with the intent of keeping it for yourself, and you know that the owner doesn't even maybe know that it fell from them, so they haven't had yesh omrim shahareza over bekulam. So you seem to have violated everything possible. But then if later you have remorse and you decide to return it to the owner, you've repaired every single thing that you initially violated. Avalim kvar nisyashu habalim havi me'uvas she'enu yachol liskan. But if the owner already had yeyush, and then you decide to return it, then even though you've done the right thing, but you still have on your ledger, let's say, you still have a negative commandment that you violated. It's not something that you can rectify by giving it back. You'll have to do tshuva. So, and therefore, by returning it, it's like you're giving him a gift, because by that time, it's already too late. He says, but that's according to the Rambam. Nishar ha'isr mishum lo tit'alim avol mitakin al yidei hachzero halav shelo tigzol v'chein mitakin ha'aseh v'ha'shava eno matana. Other poskim, other than the Rambam, say that you do rectify to some degree. You've rectified the isser of lo tigzol, and we don't consider this to be just giving him a gift, but rather you're restoring someone's property to them to some degree, even though you still have violated certain parts of the commandment by waiting until they had yeush, but nonetheless, you've still rectified. Okay, you've rectified some aspect of the mitzvah. We'll hold it here for today. Okay, so everyone.
We're going to email the.
I haven't had a chance to do it yet.
What was the name we're going to